Hi, Chief. So the directors of the Trust Society are set out by the TFN Trust Act. They comprise the members of the Finance and Audit Committee, which is Chief Cassidy, Councillors Alm, Baker, Williams, and our CAO, Kim Baird. And in addition, 4 directors, 2 of whom must be TFN members not on legislature. Those are Jessica O'Rourke and Ryan Daum. And then 2 other directors who are outside directors, one of whom must be an expert in financial matters. That is Aaron Collins, who's a partner with MNP. And the other outside director is Colin Ward, who was a former TFN employee who is now working at the provincial government. The reason we have the directors is, when Kevin presented the financial statements today, for example, they've already been reviewed in detail by the directors and approved for signature at that level. So you're seeing, as members of the entire society, the result of the work that was done then. If there are changes to be made to policies like the investment policy, we did some of that last year, the directors do that kind of work too. So the directors met on April 9th. 5 of the directors were present. They reviewed and approved the audited financial statements that were presented to you today. They also reviewed and approved the allocations and distribution of income that was earned in 2024. And just to follow on what Kevin said earlier, to ensure that the income is not taxed, we distribute all the income out, and then if not all of it is needed, it gets recontributed. So in the legacy trust, for example, we transfer all 100% of what was earned to TFN, 60% gets distributed out to the members, and then the remaining 40% gets reinvested back into the legacy trust. So the trust keeps growing in size, but it's growing at a rate that is not being taxed. Income is taxed, income's not taxed, but if the income just stayed in the trust, the income on the income would be taxed. So by contributing it all out and then paying it back in, we shield ourselves from income tax. So the directors review that whole process and ensure that the right distributions are made, not just for the Legacy Trust, but for the Fishery Stewardship Trust, the Treaty Settlement Trust, and so on. And Chief, I just present this report to be received for information by the legislators today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just trying to see Loretta. Okay, Loretta.
Okay, thank you. It's still clear as mud. I'm just kidding. But are you able to share what companies we are invested in? I'm just looking at this and it doesn't make any. It's not very clear. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll defer that to Jack's presentation. He'll take us through some of the, probably not all of them, but just some of the major ones. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Oh, Loretta, you have another question?
Not a question, just a comment. It's so strange not having our feather when we're needed. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, we're all waiting to be fined. Okay. Okay, thank you, Mark. We'll just move on to the next part of the evening that everyone's been waiting for. We'll ask Jack Jamieson to give us a recap of the investment performance in 2024, as well as a sense of investment strategies, market expectations going forward, especially given all the economic uncertainties we're facing. And Jack is here in person. He couldn't resist a trip to the beautiful West Coast.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Laura. And greetings to all, Chief Laura, and to all. Really, I want to thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. And I think Mark and probably Chief has always heard if I run away from home, you'll probably see me wandering in your streets somewhere, because be very proud of your territory, and I'll leave it at that. But it goes without saying, we're extremely honored to be supporting you. I just looking at that, it's been 15 years almost to the day that we've been in your community supporting the Trust Society for 15 years. And again, it goes without saying, we're extremely honored. And to many of you that I haven't seen for a while, happy birthday, happy New Year, and everything else. It's been a while, but be proud of your nation. I will tell you, we, as some background, again, as introduced, my name is Jack Jamieson. I'm the founder, I guess, and the gray hair, I call it Arctic Blonde. Sounds a little bit sexier, but our practice has been around over 25 years. We're very honored to be supporting over 60 Indigenous relationships from coast to coast to coast. And I will tell you, we are extremely honored to be part of the Tsawwassen family. And it's just, you are very respected across Canada. And I speak at conferences you're very much respected, and I'll leave it at that. But as far as our role, really, I guess from a standpoint, the trust agreements are really the rules. We help we work with the Trust Society to help develop the investment policies to guide the investments to meet the needs of the trust. We're also a bit of a dating service. I guess we help find investment managers. We have research. We just research all the firms out there, and we don't belong to anybody. Mark's alluded to this, and we really try to make sure that again, I call it a dating service. We're independent. We don't belong to any of them. We go through that search process for our clients. Managers don't necessarily fire themselves, so we stick around, again, on your side of the table to make sure the performance is appropriate. So what we're going to talk about today, and Mark's he's going to put up the when I get passionate about this stuff. I talk too much sometimes, but we'll talk a bit about the markets. We'll talk a bit about the economy, and really, most important, get into, and again, I'm sorry I don't have necessarily a detailed listing of your holdings, but I can certainly get that to you very quickly. But and just, I don't know, something about a joke came up. Okay, so just to have some fun here. What kind of tree can you hold in your hand? Just a little quick joke. Anybody? A palm tree. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know. My daughter told me that when I was a little kid. Capital markets. Next slide. So we'll focus on, this is, I guess, the annual general meeting, but we are going to talk a bit about 2025 as well. But 2024 was very good, and it was very good for the majority of the trusts. You looked at the bonds. Bonds were, at the end of March, I think bonds were upper 7% range, almost 8%. Stocks, all double-digit growth. Inflation, it's been quite inflation did return to kind of to the boundaries that the government of Canada aims at, kind of between that 1% and 3%. But again, if we kind of go back, I don't know everybody's memory, but back in COVID, we all got shut down. And when we're all locked up, we can't make things. And if you can't make products, there's fewer products out there. And if fewer products, prices go up. And that's really called inflation. It's the cost of goods and services. And when COVID went down, we all got locked up, prices go up. And then what happens, ultimately, that's inflation. So inflation started in Canada, we were up to almost 8% inflation rate. Targets for inflation between 1 and 3. So what does the Bank of Canada do? They start raising rates. And again, if I was thinking about getting a car or something, and all of a sudden now I can't buy that car, or I don't want to because, gee, I got to pay a lot more for that car loan. I'll wait. I'll wait to buy that product till another time. And that's ultimately what happens when they raise rates. The purchase and sales tends to come down because it seemed very expensive in all our eyes, and that brings inflation down. Again, the cost of goods and services. So the good news, and again, this is all good news, good returns, inflation's back in time. This thing called GDP, that third bullet, is really gross domestic product. We call it economic growth, I guess. And it was pretty resilient in the sense of the last quarter of 2024, gross domestic product was about, GDP was about 2.28%. And again, I know coming into last year, some of the stuff going on there, gee, were we going to run into a recession or not? A recession is where we have two negative periods, negative growth periods, 2 years or 2 quarters in a row. But I think it's fairly safe. My crystal ball is not perfect, but I think it's fairly safe to say we're not going into a recession based on the current crystal ball, I guess, at this point. I will say GDP, although we're saying 2.28% there in Q4 of 24, its expectations is maybe around 1.7, 1.9. So it's coming down. The pace of growth is coming down a bit, but still positive, and that's a good thing. But certainly not, nobody's speculating a recession. We hear it on the news now and again, but so pretty good. 2024, I call it blue skies, were the expectations for 2025 as well. If you go to the next slide, we just see, I get all excited about these little charts here, but this is just showing you the inflation again. So over in you see on the left side, the column, you'll see a 1% number and a 3%, and it's kind of grayed out between 1 and 3. And that's, you can see sort of the inflation since 2015, which is actually when we sort of started tracking everything and with you as the Trust Society. And it's been hanging around there. And then you could see, as we said, in 2020, the COVID hit and it started going up. Into 2022, government started raising rates, and all of a sudden inflation did start coming down. And you see in the box on the right-hand side, inflation in Canada is about 1.7% right now in April. And actually it's interesting because it was a little bit higher than that, that little box. It's hard to read here right now, but it declined to 1.7% from 2.3%, which was, and it was really due to the carbon tax. The government of Canada removed carbon tax, and that brought down, that helped with inflation a bit because it reduced our costs, and that's inflation. Next slide. Oh yeah, I don't know if anybody's heard of this guy, Donald Trump. When we talk about the market, sorry, that's one of my jokes too, but anyway. but again, 2024 was 2024. 2025, as we know, Mr. Trump was elected, and certainly the markets, this does play into things that were going on in 2025. I know this is an AGM, but let's talk about 2025. And certainly when he got elected in, the world was, or at least the US anyway, they're way to go, Donald, and the markets went pretty good for a while. Then Mr. Trump, as we know, this thing called tariffs, he was announcing basically a trade war, like a trade war with the world and all the tariffs. And we just heard, was it, I guess, yesterday, last night, our steel and aluminum is going to be tariffed with 50% and things like this. And so again, if we look back, again, the tariffs created some challenges, and even internally within the U.S. And quite frankly, on April 3rd, that's about the third bullet there, the S&P 500, that's the U.S. market, experienced its worst one-day period since 2020, declining 4.7 one day. 4.7 doesn't sound like a lot, but 4.7% in one day. we'd be really happy if we made 4% over a month or a quarter for that matter. But going down that, then all of a sudden, I think Donald started thinking, and gee, that didn't go over very good, did it? And just April 9th, so that down market was April 3rd, April 9th. He said, okay, folks, been thinking about this a little bit harder. We're going to go on a 90-day delay in tariffs. And the U.S. market went up 9.5% one day. So it went down, dump. He said something that he thought everybody liked, and it goes up and everything else. Again, I guess the investment success is this suggesting is through time. And I'm saying this to you as Trust Society. Markets go up, they burp, then they come down a bit, then they go up, they burp, and they come down a bit. And you're going to see this in some of the numbers that you're doing extremely well. Your managers, I will tell you, because we were working with them too to see what are you doing about things like this and tariffs and all Mr. Trump taking control of the world, and what are they doing in the sense of looking at what the holdings within your different trusts. And they did go very much, they were very conscious of firms that are going to be tariffed. And I don't really understand, like Donald, like if you imply 25 or 50% tariffs or whatever it is from China or Canada or Mexico or wherever, that increases the price of all the people in the US that have to buy things. The distributor of that product is not going to absorb, the intent is that they aren't going to absorb that tariff in the price. They're going to sell it to, if you're all Americans, you're going to be paying more for goods and services. And that's inflation. That's going to drive prices up. And it seems to be counter to what he is looking for to bringing inflation down. But I'm not sure if he quite gets it or not. But anyway, so all that being said, your managers have very much been looking at all the holdings, every stock in the holdings that they have for you, just to make sure, are these ones going to be hit by the tariffs, or are they going to be impacted by the tariffs? And again, if you look at, I don't know, an elevator company, well, you always need elevators to keep going and everything else. So things like that are going to be, are these companies still successful despite the kind of the concepts that are being imposed on them? But so it's, and I think the markets have actually done very good. I think most of us, we were talking a month or two ago, everybody be going, oh my God, is the world going to end, or what's going to happen with the markets? We go to the next one. This is probably, and I don't know if we've had this kind of discussion with you, but it's this thing called the Magnificent Seven. And I hate to focus on the U.S. market, but this has had a big impact to your portfolio, on both the downside and the upside. The Magnificent Seven, if you look at that middle column, those 7 stocks, and again, those 7 stocks in the U.S. made up basically the average return of those 7 stocks was about 60%. The overall market last year in the U.S. was 36%. But those 7 stocks, so Meta, that's basically Facebook, Tesla, Alphabet's Google, NVIDIA, that's the artificial intelligence, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple. Those 7 stocks, there was more invested in those 7 stocks than the entire markets in the UK, in China, France, and Japan on the right-hand column there. So more money invested in those 7 stocks than all of those countries combined. And it was a huge impact. But a lot of the managers, they were very risky. They weren't going to invest in them. And so was that good or bad? The next slide really just kind of shows you what happened. The next slide, again, it's a busy little slide, but just focus on over on the far right, the last column on the right. You can see in 2024, only 25% of the stocks in the US market beat the market. Only 25% of the stocks beat the market. So, hey, manager A, manager B, you're working for Twassen. Like, what's going on with your US performance? And they're saying, Jack, it's a pretty tough market to beat. Only 25% of the market beat the market in 2024. And it just, I guess if we go to the next one, the reason why is because of the Magnificent Seven. And again, what you see here, again in the far right column, what happened in 25 with the decline of the Magnificent Seven? They, in the new year, every one of those stocks that we just talked about, down You know what? Tesla was down 51%, NVIDIA down 30%, Amazon down 21%, Alphabet down 20%, and so goes the story. Microsoft's 15 or 16%, Apple down 13%. And that's really what the managers were very cautious about, very concerned about, getting invested in those. And sure enough, the managers' expectations came through. And what happened, the little comment on the right there, in 2025, with the decline of the Magnificent Seven, the number of companies beating the US market rose from that 25% I just told you about up to 65%. Yay. And that's what's happening. We're going to see it in some of the returns that we underperformed a bit in still pretty good absolute numbers, but we underperformed a bit over the year because of that New York or the US market. But in the most recent quarter, March, we're back in the limelight again. So if we go to the next slide, actually the next slide, I guess. So this is kind of Q4, Q1. So this is just the asset mix. Again, part of our role is to making sure, again, the investment policy dictates how much in cash, how much in bonds or fixed income, how much in Canadian equity, international equity, US equity, the target versus the portfolio. So you can see the managers make money two ways. They can invest in stocks and bonds. They can pick good stocks and bonds, but they can also overweight or underweight with the ranges, within the ranges on this slide for each of those asset classes. So if they think it's going to be a bad place to be over here, they can underweight and they can overweight somewhere else within the market. And that can add value. Again, pick good stocks and bonds, but overweight or underweight in an area that their crystal ball kind of says, oh, we got to stay away from there a bit. So the next slide really, again, this is sort of what we're all looking for, I guess, is really, I guess I'm just where we want to talk here, but I know Kevin, I don't know, was it Kevin that we were talking about? I guess fees came up here somewhere, but basically the manager's fees, I know Mark was talking a bit about fees. Your overall trust expenses are one thing. It's more than the manager's fees, but your manager's fees are in the range of 0.3 to 0.35%. So if a 1/4% is 0.25, you're paying these managers based on the level of assets about 0.3, 0.35 is from memory, I'd say, in that range. So it's pretty small. The dollars sound like a lot, but again, you do have 100 and, again, based here December and March, 178, 175 million under management. So again, it seems like a big amount, but it's a pretty small percentage. And I will say, I guess the other question too, and I don't know, this is maybe not appropriate, but when we're talking about from the legacy, the membership payment, again, it's 60%, I guess, of income, correct, Mark? And income can be, and part of the challenge that was created last year, I think, just to elaborate, and I'll leave it at that, but what is income? Interest, dividends, so interest on bonds, dividends on stocks, and realized gains. So if you sell a stock and there's a realized gain, or you sell a stock, you buy a stock for $100, you sell it for $125, and you sell that stock at $125 a share, you've made a gain, a realized gain of $25. And I think what was happening last year, what happened is one of the managers was, I think it was just a look at the market too. They liquidated a lot of some of their stocks. So the liquidation created a lot more realized gains than would normally be the case. And as Mark alluded to, we're going to work with both managers to try and understand, try and get some sort of a compatible that will be similar going forward, that will be appropriate, I guess. But that's sort of what happened last year. One manager just had a lot more realized gains. They had a reason for selling a bit more than they normally would have. But here again, the good news, December 31st, I guess over in the far right, the one square appreciation, 41.6 million. You look at the end of March, 44.5 million. So again, I'm not sure if these align all that well with Kevin's number. They can be different with accrued interest and things like that, but he's a lot smarter than I am, so take his word for it. But again, you can see too, just even in any given period, whether it was the quarter or the year ending December, the year ending March, year ending December, it was up 18, that's up 18 million. That's money made. The trusts, plural, made $18 million in 1 year ending December. They made another, well, again, it was about 14 million at the end of March. But again, the trusts, they're doing very well in the sense of absolute dollars and things like that. The next slide, performance. I'm talking too much here. Mark, I haven't seen the buzzer yet here, but okay. Sorry, boss. So this is kind of what I'm saying. If you go over to the far right, you can see December and March. This is the overall combined holdings. Inception as of the end of December up 6.97. So call it 7%. All we can ask the managers to do is not meet the market, but beat the market. You can see in December, call it 7% versus 6.39 or 6.4%. Check, that's good. On March, 6.98. It's all basically the same return versus 6.4. Basically the same return. That's all we can ask the managers to do. When you get a look into some of these things too, yeah, over 5 years, both periods, beating the market. Over 3 years, beating the market. 1 year, red line, red circle. 12 point, almost 13% in December versus 14. 1 year ending March, 9.5 versus 11.25. And that was the Magnificent Seven. Magnificent Seven over the year, it was just hard to beat. And not so much hard to beat. The managers didn't want to participate in those Magnificent Seven because what happened in the first quarter of 2025, look what happened. All of a sudden, here we go again, nice green circle, up 1.7 versus 1.6. And in fact, that benchmark is a little bit higher than I've seen in other reports. But again, the manager's crystal ball came true. Those Magnificent Seven got hurt, and all of a sudden, you know, what you saw over the year flipped in the quarter ending March because the Magnificent Seven went for a dump. The next slide, really, again, just we're getting down to the end of it here. So everybody, appreciate your patience. Again, just a visual. It's basically just saying here, that little right circle on the top right, since appreciation, you're up about 44.5 million. Since inception, about 6.98 versus 6.4. And that's all we can really ask. You can see that squiggly line too in the diagram. No markets go straight up. They go up. We see COVID hit. We see the inflation, that part hit with things like that. So it is a squiggly line, but again, it's going the right direction over the 15 years for sure. And then again, I will talk the next slide really just, I get all excited about these pictures, but maybe a bit confusing. Just focus. One of the things is do not give all your money to one manager. We have different styles in the market. There are growth stocks in the market. There are value stocks in the market. On that chart, the orange line is value stocks, and then the growth stocks are the purple line. And your purple manager is TDAM, TD Asset Management. Your orange manager is Butel Goodman. And again, sometimes, and again, no manager reigns supreme through all environments. So we do want a purple and we want an orange manager because you can see in the far right there within that highlighted area, growth was great. Then look, it peaked and then it dumped and then value came on vogue and then it went down and growth came back on and things like that. So it is a risk management thing, I guess, in the sense of multi-manager, multi-style approach. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. The next page, really, again, how are the managers doing? And again, you know, why don't all managers have all green line circles around each one of them? Because again, purple managers are in vogue sometimes, orange managers are in vogue sometimes. But both managers, again, you look at, you know, over the quarter, both managers basically beat the market, which we talked about. Butel kind of is interesting because they're the value manager. In growth environments, they will probably lag. And you can see over the year, Butel Goodman lagged more than, you know, like TD was a bit better than Butel Goodman. But the down markets is where those value managers, they make money in the good times, but they protect in the downside. And if we remember COVID, we remember the other period, COVID, where markets were both stocks and bonds were negative, and that falls in that 3 to 5 year period where Butel was served. But TD Asset Management, since inception, they're the better manager. But the last 3 and 5 years, Butel's your better manager. And over the last 1 year, stocks, growth stocks, TD is your better manager. And again, that's why we hire 2 managers, different styles for different environments. The next slide is really, again, if we look at, this is really just kind of it's hard to, you've got a lot of trusts, obviously. And this is just kind of a recap, sort of what you can see. You know, this one shows legacy, the fisheries, the treaty, miners, and sort of the overall combined holdings kind of thing. So they're all making money. And I'm not sure what else I can talk to about this, but the other slides that we were talking about performance was on your overall combined holdings. So it's doing well. We did move your asset mix to a little bit, like in the legacy trust, it's more 60% equities, 40% fixed income and alternatives. I know originally we were a little bit more tamer than that, but it's more what we would call a balanced asset mix. It's kind of 60-40, equities kind of thing. And again, the last page, I guess, again, just to avoid all the detail, if you go over on the far right side, that's all important to me. Since inception, every one of those trusts is beating the market. It was kind of interesting, though, to see that one under 1 year, the very bottom of the Miners Trust, it outperformed every one of them. And that was kind of interesting because, again, it only holds about 30% in stocks. But bonds did very, very good. And that Miners Trust did very, very good. It was actually one of the better returns of all the other trusts, which was kind of interesting. So, but all the trusts, and that's from an advisor, that's all we can ask for. Don't meet the market, beat the market. And they're all of them, they're doing the job. So on that front, I'll shut up and I say thank you. And it's great to see everybody again. I don't have any friends, so it's always nice to. I tell you, if I run away from home, man, I'm going to be see me in your streets here today. Everybody, you're amazing folks. Your personalities, you're positive, you care, and your community is very much respected. I will say that again. So give each other a hug and feel good about where you are here. So your territory is amazing. So good to see everybody. Okay, shut up, Jack. Okay, goodbye. Love you.
Thanks, Jack. Does anybody have any questions for Jack?
I will send a copy.
Ms. Altonaut?
Okay, thank you. I just want to say you're very passionate about your work, and it's a lot of numbers to remember for all of us. But you're doing a lot of high praise for the Tsawwassen people. I was going to get cheeky, but I won't. Okay, thank you.
Chumquat?
Heshka, Chief. Thank you, Jack, for that presentation. I don't know if I'm getting smarter or if your presentations are getting clearer, but I really appreciate the presentation. I'm really impressed with the manager's take on that Magnificent Seven, and Tia and I were just talking about it's like a weatherman. You know, there's no crystal ball, but clearly they really do their work and their homework, and we appreciate the benefit that we get into our legacy, into all of our trust funds, and the results are showing. So thank you for today's presentation and for all the work that you do to advocate for our continued success in our investments, Heshka.
Thank you. Thank you, Chumquat. You have to apologize because I have Marianne and Kevin to my back. Did you have any questions, Marianne? Or?
No questions, just thank you for the presentation. Really well done.
Thank you, Marianne. Is there any other questions? Oh, Dawn.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Lots of numbers, lots of info, and I appreciate all that you put into this and what you do for TFN. And I also have a joke for you. Why did the coach go into the bank? To get his quarterback. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dawn. That was a good one. Anybody else have any questions or jokes? Doesn't look like there's any more questions. And I think there's no more further business, but I want to say thank you to Kevin and Jack for being here this evening, and thank you to all you directors for making the time tonight. So I guess this meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you. Hajka.
No.